Yes, team, welcome back to another episode of the Art of Performance podcast, episode number 44 in the house today. And we are going to be talking about all things to do with specificity and all of the training examples you can think of. And I'm not going to do it alone, so you don't have to listen to my boring, monotone, moustache-filtered voice. Today, I have the fantastic Mr. Curtis. Jack, how the devil are you, my good sir?
I am wonderful, thank you, my friends. I'm absolutely spectacular. And can I just commend you again on your fantastic Yorkshire accent there? It's a homage to my homeland.
A homage to the Yorkshireman indeed. So, for anybody who doesn't know you, let's give us a quick 20-second spiel on who the hell Jack Curtis really is, lad.
Who the devil am I? I'm a Yorkshireman, and I am proud of it. And this is, I think, a lot of the times where people would launch into how they're a coach first and foremost. I am very much a husband to my wonderful wife, first and foremost. A lover of food, a lover of all things strength, all things fitness, and someone who has been on a journey myself from overweight, unhappy young kid to a coach who has been in the industry for going on 10 years now, going on a decade, which is pretty scary, having worked with people from all sorts of backgrounds, from young kids in a tennis club to old Joan down the road who had a hip replacement and was scared of getting down on the floor in case she couldn't get back up, and endurance athletes, powerlifters competing at national and world level, everything in between. So I've been around the block a few times in the last decade.
Yeah, and an interesting fact that somebody doesn't know about you is you're also a lover of the sandwich.
Yes, yeah. Only if it's going to increase the anabolic effect of a training session, of course.
Something we can certainly discuss in today's session when we talk about anabolic effect of training.
I would consider myself a connoisseur of the anabolic sandwich.
I feel like, yeah, and we got off onto a bit of a to and a fro with anabolic sandwiches. We had the coleslaw, the chicken, we had it all going on at one point. But you just, yeah, I mean, the anabolic sandwiches and the porridge chronicles. I feel like there's an opportunity there for a Sunday morning podcast for anybody in the future who wants us to do it. Let us know, leave us a comment, leave us a love, leave us a share, leave us a like, and maybe there could be, I don't know, the anabolic sandwiches and porridge chronicles podcast. It could be a future thing, and we could bring you everything that you could possibly want, need, and desire in podcasting about fitness and health, but maybe some recipes on some anabolic sandwiches and some recipes on porridge chronicles. I feel like we're onto a winner here. We could be.
I think we are. It could be a collaboration to end all collaborations, my friend.
Exactly that. Exactly that. So let's dive deep into specificity. I don't want this podcast, and I'm sure you don't, because we could sit here and talk for 9 hours about specificity. But we're going to try and whistle stop tour over this, because I feel like Jack and I could do 3, 4, 5 different episodes here just on training specificity alone, and many more to come. And I'm sure you'll see a lot more of Jack on the podcast next week. Just saying. So we're going to dive deep, and then we're going to keep the episodes rolling over from there. But let's start with specificity. And by the word of the dictionary definition, focusing, as we know, focus on specific areas, specific body parts, body systems that are needed for us in order to succeed in whatever goal or desirable goal we're trying to chase after. Like, we know specificity is a simple concept, but what do you find is often the issue when we talk about specificity, not just with coaches, but with athletes as well?
I think it's almost this dichotomous thing of people not giving it enough weight, or people going far too sort of down the rabbit hole with it. You know, we're getting to the I'm talking about the points where people are mimicking things very, very exactly to try and replicate stuff that is done in the outside world in the gym, and sort of missing the point entirely with that. And then on the other side, people who don't go specific enough and end up trying to be a jack of all trades, which is fine if you want to be a generalist. But when you want to be a specialist in something, it's not going to get you towards where you need to be. So it's making sure we kind of don't fall into either of those extremes there.
Yeah. I absolutely agree. And I think if we were to put it in, I like the term when we talk about people that are hybrid athletes or people that are just lovers of fitness, I call them the expert generalists. Like, we want to make you an expert in lots of general components to health and well-being, whether that be aerobic capacity, whether it be strength, speed, power, agility, for whatever example. Like, I know that when I'm going to be 65, I am absolutely going to still be able to clean and jerk over 100 kilos. I'm still going to be able to snatch my body weight. I'm still going to be able to beat my grandchildren in a 3-point sprint start. And I'm also going to be able to do a 5K park run with my grandkids. So I want to be an expert generalist for as long as I fucking possibly can. In every fucking sense of the word. I basically, if my daughter, God forbid and heaven forbid, and God rest her soul and bless her when she does do this, brings a lad home and he makes her cry and he runs, I'm going to go and find him. I'm going to absolutely guillotine choke him because I've got the speed, the power, the strength, and I've also been doing some BJJ so I can fold the little shit in half. That's pretty much what life is about. The expert generalist.
Yeah,
But that's what we want, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's training to be an absolute Terminator.
Yeah, exactly. That's
home.
all we want. Just to be a Terminator. That is exactly it. Be not the machine variation, the loving, caring kind. But tell you what, press the fucking button. Things are going to change pretty quickly. So when we talk about specificity, let's go into the realm that you're obviously a big part of as well. Something that I've done for many years as well. But we talk about powerlifters. Powerlifters competing at a high level. As a basic broad brush statement, what do they need to do in the term of specificity?
Yeah, this is very simple to distill here. Powerlifters need to be really, really good at doing 1 rep.
Exactly. And they need to lift heavy things to then go and compete. And they
100%.
need to lift heavy things in 3 areas of life.
Mm-hmm.
The squat, the bench, and the deadlift. So when we talk about specificity and why specificity is so important, I think it's important for us to discuss how when we talk about a powerlifter in the context of resistance training and whatever else, etc., let's go deep into what's actually happening when you take a powerlifter who has just arrived in your gym and they just wanted to start powerlifting. Today is the first day on set. Today's the first day on scene. The real world example is obviously of the powerlifter, the squatter, the bencher, and the deadlifter. Yeah. But what would you say is some of the basic science that we need to understand, even as general consumers as well, of health and fitness? What's some of the basic things that we need to understand about specificity when we're talking about adapting to what's being put on our body?
Yeah, so I think this is where you need to look at like what parameters of training and skill building you're actually trying to work within here. And I think this is where people like maybe sometimes hear specificity and think, it's the periodization of training, or actually it's also what skills are you working on? Are you working on your weaknesses here? What's the specific goal of each phase? So really, for me, when someone first walks in the gym, it's about figuring out where are they right now and what is the end point that we're trying to reverse engineer from. So then we can start to look at, okay, well, we need some baseline skills in there. You need to be able to squat, bench, and deadlift to comp standard. So do you actually understand what comp standard is? Once we've got that in place, do you actually know how to make yourself better at those things from a skill building perspective? Where are you with that? You might be able to hit comp depth, but can you do it with control? Can you do it with intensity? Do you crumble when you get past 80% on the bar? Where are your weaknesses in all of these movements? Do you understand how your own leverages play into this? And this is where the athlete's journey starts to get really, really individualized here, as opposed to something that is just like, here's what everyone needs to do.
Yeah.
But I think there are some general things that people do need to take into account. Like, first and foremost, like, where are your weaknesses in the sport? And yes, we want to play to your strengths, but we also want to make your weaknesses stronger. So by the time you get to competition, you don't have those as weaknesses holding you back anymore. But ultimately, it comes back to what are you doing to build those 3 lifts, and how is everything else in your training program supporting that? And that's in a GPP, general prep phase, hypertrophy, whatever you want to call it. That's going into your specific prep phase. That's also going into your taper and your peak. How is it contributing to getting you better at those 3 things? And I think that's the question that everyone needs to ask themselves when they're going through this process, and asking, do I have a good enough reason for why I'm doing these things to contribute to me getting better at those 3 lifts?
Couldn't agree anymore, mate. I think specificity, like you said there, you will get away with most generalists will get away with a lot of general physical preparedness work. I.e., let's just say, for example, if you're a powerlifter and you did bench 1 week and you did squat another week and you did deadlift another week as your main sessions over 3 weeks, and then you did some accessories and you did some body pump, bodybuilding, body beautiful style stuff too, you will get away and see some quite what we call the amateur gains. You will get quite a few amateur gains in the early stages of any training program or any stimulus that you find yourself changing towards. For example, if you're somebody who is a power lifter by trade and by nature, and you came across into the endurance world and you started to train more endurance, early on in those stages, you're going to see some acute level changes to your performance because your body is beginning to adapt to that demand you're placing upon it. And I think a really cool way to break this down is to put it into 4 key areas. So we've got the physical, we've got the skill-based stuff, but we've also, and that's like the technical piece, we've also got this tactical and psychological aspect. So we've got physical, psychological, technical, and tactical, and the 4 key pillars that kind of intertwine and combine with it. And there's a coach. Our role is to kind of feed each one of those little pillars with the best specific adaptation that we're trying to chase, the best stimulus that we're trying to put your body through. So in a physical setting, as a powerlifter, of course, it's going to be the squat, bench, and deadlift. And there will be some accessory pieces to that where we can underpin weaknesses, etc. Equally, like you've mentioned there, I think it's really important to note the technical stuff that's going to be important here is if somebody has the desire to compete, it's probably going to be quite important, even if and we can use this as a high rocks athlete as well, right? High rocks seems to be the big hoo-ha at the moment. From a high rocks perspective, specificity, well, we know it is a lot of endurance-based activity. So therefore, what you are doing is going to have a large aerobic demand on your system in the basic broad brush scope. We know that strength capabilities, you're going to be pushing loads in excess of your 60% RM and below, where muscular endurance is going to be applied. So there's going to have to be a lot of opportune moments here in your training from a physical perspective where we're training aerobic capacity, i.e. running, because it's specific. If I just made you do some stuff on the watt bike, although that might help, it's not going to translate into what we're trying to deliver when it talks about high rock specific training. Equally, if I got you to do a goblet squat, yes, there is some transferable skills there. It's front loaded. It's being loaded through that anterior plane. We know that, we can see it, we can feel it. But if I don't add the press through the wall ball in that movement, then I'm not training the specific movements that you're going to come up against in a high rocks event. So I think when we discuss specificity, the physical components are what we really get after. What would you say when we talk about specificity? Because you've mentioned some of the stuff around technical stuff. Now, one of the biggest bugbears for me is from a technical aspect, Olympic weightlifting. You've probably seen it with Olympic weightlifting. Early stages, the technical and the skill acquisition is such a massive proponent of Olympic weightlifting, especially if you want longevity in what we're delivering. Yeah, it would be like somebody who's never ran in their life. And this is the other thing, like the couch to 5K can blow my mind sometimes, because within 2 weeks, we've got people that have gone from the couch and now they're running 5K, yet they've not built up the time and the volume or the intensity that even earns them the right to get there. And I mean, in some cases, some people are fine. But, you know, when we talk about the skills-based stuff, God, we could go down so many rabbit holes, because even from a running perspective, when we talk about gait cycle, we talk about heel, we talk about midfoot, heel, or heel plant, midfoot, toe off, the sequencing, the cyclic motion, the number 4 that we're trying to replicate every time we do a movement with our leg. That is training specificity. That is focusing on specificity.
Mm-hmm.
But there are so many fucking realms that we can go into here. So for the Gen Pop individual that wants to be a hybrid athlete, wants to be strong, wants to be fit, wants to be fast, wants to be resilient, what is the coach's job early on in, and this is for all our general consumers, like, it's a needs analysis, isn't it? But what do you go through from that needs analysis perspective to really understand, okay, where am I going to target specificity here?
Yeah. So I think first and foremost, you need to understand what that means for you. And I think your example there of the High Rocks is really good, because it's a very sort of mixed sport event. So I had a smile on my face because I actually just signed up to do a High Rocks event next March.
Yeah, buddy.
And it's one of those things where you need to look at, what does that actually mean to you? What are the parameters that you have on this for what you want to achieve here? And then we can start organizing, well, what are our priorities in training? Do we need to work on building your strength base? Do we need to work on building your aerobic base? You know, how does that fit into the long-term picture? If you want to get really powerful and really fast, do you have the key things there already that are going to allow you to tap into that properly, or do you need to do some work to get there? And when it comes to Gen Pop looking at themselves, you know, you're coming from a perspective of perhaps someone who, you know, doesn't have the same level of education as a coach who's been in the industry 10, 20 years. But you can still ask those same questions of, what do I actually want to achieve here? And trying to get to use the expected term here, trying to get more specific with what you're actually looking to get out of training first and foremost. So I almost think about it like I'm building like a pie chart of, what percentage do I want to work on, you know, my strength here? What percentage am I looking to work on my endurance, you know, my power, my speed, my strength endurance? Do I need to be able to repeat that, or am I doing one solid effort? How does all of this fit into what my training actually looks like? Because if I'm wanting to get, you know, strong enough to push 150 kilo sled and then go on a kilometer run straight into a 500 meter row, back on a run, back into wall balls, like something like a High Rocks, is doing a bodybuilding program going to get me there? No, it isn't, because it's not ticking the boxes that the end goal needs. And really, I think that's the first thing that everybody needs to do, coach or not, is look at what you want that end goal to be. And here's the other thing about specificity. It's fine to be a generalist. It's fine to want to do a bit of everything, but you can still define how much of each of those components you want to work on. Because if you just want to be able to be fit enough to run a 5K, you can probably do that alongside a bodybuilding program very easily. But if you want to be able to run a 10K in under 40 minutes and shift 200 kilos on a deadlift, well, they're very specific goals. And then we have to start thinking about, how do they fit in with each other? And this is where, as you go through that journey, you're going to figure out, and this is maybe more along the tactical side of things, you know, how is that fitting into the rest of my life? Am I actually breaking? Is my body breaking down? Am I able to handle these things? Because everyone has a different level of battery that they can give to it, and a different level of resilience based on, you know, their genetics, their anthropometry, and also their training history as well.
Yeah.
So the context is really important with what you're going in with, assessing weak points, assessing limitations, and then looking at breaking it down from what you actually want the end goal to be here.
Massively. I think that's probably a really important thing that you said there about the generalist as well. Like, you can bias certain aspects of your training program. So I work with a lot of generalist athletes. I also work with a lot of specific based athletes. And the beauty with the generalist athletes is, if you actually sit down on the surface layer, most people come to any coach with something in mind, and it'll be something along the lines of, I want to lose X amount of weight, or I want to feel a little bit stronger and feel a little bit fitter and feel a little bit faster. The problem with those questions is they're very surface layer. And those surface layer questions don't actually relate to things that you find really important to yourself. For example, a mum might want to lose a little bit of weight. Okay, great. Why do you want to do that? Well, I want to do that because I want to feel more confident. Okay, but let's talk about the physical aspects of movement here. Let's talk about the physical aspects of you training. What do you want to be able to do with your newfound fitness? And a great question for you to ask yourself is, in 3 months' time, what do you say and do? What do you think? What do you feel? What gains have you made and what pains have you reduced? And going through this mapping process where you ask yourself, actually, what the fuck do I want to feel like? Because if you want to feel a certain way, then that's going to bias a certain type of training. If you want to feel incredibly strong, let's say you've got 3 kids and bath time is an absolute nightmare. And you know that you've got to pin 3 of them down in the bath whilst trying to wash their head and the dog's trying to jump up and hump your leg. Like, there is going to be probably an element of isometric training that we're going to be doing here. Like just holding things down, but this is obviously the wildest example, but you get the point behind it. The dad that wants to be able to, the dad that wants to be able to run around the park run with his kid. There is a component of training that we can bias towards aerobic capacity that might just be leveraged against our strength work. Strength is obviously still going to be important, but the main component of what he wants to do, because he wants to hit a 5K park run with his kid, because his kid's running a 22, 23 minute park run and he's at a 27 because he really wants to get down to that level with his kid, then of course we need to bias more training centered around aerobic capacity work. It doesn't mean that strength gets thrown out the window. It just means that we work more in an effort to help that individual with a specific component. So when you do go through your goals, ladies and gentlemen, if you listen to this or if you're watching this on YouTube, a big thing to consider that Jack and I have kind of highlighted quite a lot here is when it comes to your specific training examples, physically, what do you want to achieve? Physically, what do you want to be better at? Psychologically, how do you want to feel? That's a whole different episode, because we can talk about the psychological interventions that you can put in place, how you can coach people, how you can go through psychometric testing and analysis, understanding behavior change, word dichotomies, narratives. There is so much around psychology that we just couldn't even begin to tap on in this call. But then also not forgetting the tactical. What does the battlefield look like? What does the environment look like? How does that want to shape how you're going to be more physically fitter, stronger, faster? We're just talking about physical here today. And then the technical components that lend themselves into that. And I think it's so important that, mate, God, we could if you haven't done so already, go back a couple of episodes and listen to the resistance training deep dive that I did. And we spoke about agonist, antagonist sets, single sets, multiple drop sets, split routines, circuit-based training, full body routines, like accommodating resistance with band and chains. Like, this is the coach's job. This is what you and I now start to do. We start to go, right, okay, what's going to work for this individual? Ascending pyramid, descending pyramid? Is there time appreciative things that we've got to be conscious of? If it is, then maybe a drop set could be a good tool. But then equally, if they're a beginner, maybe it's not. So there's so many different things that we can play with. And as the coach, it's important that we kind of jump into our toolbox when we need to. We pull out the tool that we're going to use. We apply the tool, wrench it on. If that don't fucking work, okay, let's get another tool. And this is the explorative approach to health and fitness. And I feel like people that have a specific goal want it to happen like that. They want it to be so bang, quick and snappy. And if you look at specificity with that acute sort of dichotomy, you're never going to achieve the thing that you want to achieve, or you're always going to come up short and be pissed off. Absolutely always going to be coming up short and pissed off. So I hope that Jack and I have made specificity and the science behind it as simple as fucking possible, because that's all it is. It needs to be as simple as possible. This is what specificity means, and the biological mechanisms that come with that, the psychological mechanisms and the physiological and all the other pieces of the puzzle that we need to understand. Like, there is so much that we have to learn about you as an individual, and you've got to learn about yourself as you then dive deep into more of what's coming up. So, Jack, I wonder if we could tap on and jump into specific adaptation to imposed demand. Mm-hmm. What does this actually mean, especially for those goers that go into the gym? What does it actually mean? Let's say I want to hit a 140 kilo bench press and I'm currently at 105. What does the said principle really mean here?
This is really about understanding the underlying principles that are going to get you from A to B. And the way that I think about simplifying this is it's an action or actions that take you towards that specific outcome.
Yes.
So what do we know about strength adaptations? Well, we know we need to be under heavier load, but if we want to get really good at doing a 1 rep max, then we might need to build some more resilience to get there. We know we need our joints to be really stable. We know we need our technique to be spot on. We know that we need the connective tissue in between our joints to be conditioned well enough. And we know that we need to start working on the firing rate of our muscles in terms of how fast can we make them work, how hard can we make them push, how many of them can we get firing all at once. And this isn't something where you can just jump into that from the deep end. You can't start by doing 5x5 and then go test your 1 rep max. This is something that needs to be built into, and whether that's for someone who's more of a beginner doing more of a linear approach to it. It could even be doing 5 sets of 5, 5 sets of 4, 3, 2, 1 into a test week. For someone who's brand new to it, that can be enough to get them there. There's a very, very simple example of being specific about a goal. And then you can take it to more advanced levels where someone might do a conjugate block for 6 weeks, getting ready, because they're more advanced. They've run out of steam when it comes to the linear approach. That's not getting them any further. And this is not just being specific with the goal that you want to achieve, but being specific to the person who's trying to achieve that goal as well. This is where understanding your training history really comes into it too. So if you've been, for lack of a better phrase, faffing around in the gym for years, and all of a sudden you think, I'm pretty good at this benching malarkey, I wonder if I can get a 140 on the bar. If you're going in unprepared, you're not tapping into your potential properly there. And this is where being specific with the outcome really, really helps. So understanding what principles do we need to know that get us from A to B.
Yeah, perfectly explained. And that goes back through the resistance training methodologies that I've discussed previously on some of the other episodes, the type of training that you can apply into, and almost some of the basics around understanding supercompensation, understanding progressive overload as a principle, understanding basic programming concepts. Like Jack, you've just alluded to there, like, do we have a modification in weight on a linear based periodized model? Do we have a modification in weight, repetitions, and sets on a linear periodized model? Or do we go around a little bit more of a conjugate method where we have a high stim, moderate stim, low stim based training, where we play around with length of rest periods, modifications in tempo, and then modifications in load? Because as a conjugate method of training, that's kind of what we're doing. We're pushing a higher stimulus, a higher volume load, and a higher intensity on some of those high stim days. And on those lower stim days, it's probably more steady recovery work. It's lighter reps, lighter sets, lighter load, lighter intensity, maybe a little bit less rest. So there's some sort of aerobic component that can be ticked off here. And it's really important that and this is the biggest, I think this is a big thing for me as a coach that I actually find a bit of a bugbear, is that it's just a training program, right? Training program and nutrition that you do. And we're like, no, it's really not. It really isn't. And as a coach, that is adding reps and a couple of exercises is the tip of the iceberg, because everything underneath, we have to understand where you are from a training age, the modification in sets, reps, weight, length of exercise, exercise derivatives. We even have to look at your limb length and the extremities that come with your body. Because Jack, you fucking lift differently to I lift. You completely lift differently to how I lift.
Yeah, if you put our squat side by side.
Exactly. And if we did a squat side by side, a bench side by side, and a deadlift side by side, you will see two completely different movements. Although they're the same exercise, they're completely different how they're executed, the start, the finish position, the working mechanisms that come with those lifts. And I feel like if anybody is listening to this and you understand anything about training at all, understand that it's not just about a periodized program, it's all of the other aspects that come within that. What are we trying to achieve in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months? And then what modifications are we going to make in exercise selection, exercise contributions, exercise rest, sets, reps, intensity? And then when we get to the deeper level of it, how is that progressive overload pattern going to look? What's the supercompensation effect going to take with us? We talk about the stimulus, the recovery, the adaptation. We have to also understand, you even have to understand the physiology of skeletal muscle, and then break down even further and understand, well, what effect is that having from the gas principle and understanding general adaptation syndrome? Am I pushing too much? Is the stress too high? Is the resistance too much that I'm fucking coming down to exhaustion and blowing myself out? These are all the things that we have to do as a coach so that none of that ever happens. And I think that's a really important thing to understand, that when it comes to specificity, the coach has to do his job as well on the specificity side of life to make sure that what we're programming and training you to do is specific. It's not just finger out of the mouth on the air, the wind's that way, let's go and do that. And that's really, really, really important. And this applies I suppose this applies to, we look about powerlifting, right? Powerlifting, bench, squat, bench, and deadlift. When we talk about specificity and specific adaptation to an imposed demand, if we're noticing there is a specific weakness, a posterior chain weakness, for example, well, you're not just going to chuck more squats on the bar, are you, Jack? No. And this is the piece that I think people need to understand. It's that there are compound specificities that we need to kind of go into main block in. But there's also, what are the subsidiary movements? What are the accessory pieces that are contributing to those single joint exercise mechanics that are contributing to the overall goal, right?
And then there's, with all of that in mind, then we also have to account for how is the person actually adapting to it? Because there's textbook adaptation and then there's real life adaptation. But then we also have to
textbook adaptation never happens.
100%. And I've written blocks where we've done a peak and used a conjugate program, and it's peaked 2 out of the 3 lifts fantastically, and the other one has dived. And then we have to go back to the drawing board. And this is the other thing about specificity, is you're probably going to have to get it wrong a few times to get it really, really right. And this is where the finessing of coaching comes in over time. And I think understanding that journey going forwards is you need to take these things as a lesson on how to get better and understanding your body better, because you can be 10 years into training, 20 years into training, and still be picking up new things from other people. But we also have to think about, one of the points you touched on there was like how you are built structurally from a joint perspective. Where do your joints allow you to go right now? Where does that relationship between joint and muscle allow you to get to comfortably, safely, and effectively? And how does the interference of everything play in there? And I think the point that you made there about, if you've got a weakness in your posterior chain, if your hamstring curl is piss poor and you can barely get a deadlift off the ground, but your squat's amazing, okay, well, we've got some work to do there. And not just throwing more and more squats on there, that's not going to solve the problem, because we need to understand that at its bare bones, what trains the posterior chain? Throwing a load of back squats at it is going to do jack all.
Yeah, fact. And I think this is where people almost try and, I don't know, they get paralysis by analysis, and they go online and find all these exercises that they think they need to lift and do and follow. And I think I've seen this more often than not when we talk about specificity in, even things like composition, and people are trying to change their composition. They go so deep down a rabbit hole that they end up trying to follow exercise patterns that they think they need to follow because they've got weak hamstrings or they've got weak glutes, or they want to try and improve a certain aspect of their composition or movement or strength. And then they just overcomplicate an exercise, and there's no consistency with the exercise. And the exercise ends up looking like something out of a fucking circus almost. And I think a lot of people go, and this is where a lot of people go wrong down the rabbit hole with specificity, in that when they go into things, especially with resistance training, and this falls across every pillar, by the way, from isometric movements all the way down to isotonic and isokinetic, everything that you can think about from a resistance training exercise, people overcomplicate. Like, if you need to improve your hamstring length, when we go back to that tactical piece in your needs analysis, what's the tactical aspects of your life and what's going on around your environment that we need to consider? Well, me getting you to go in and set up a banded machine curl with accommodating resistance and everything in between, and you've only got 45 minutes, we've got to understand that there is optimal and practical. The age-old saying, a few arguments that have been going around online recently, the optimal and practical debate. We always want fucking optimal. Of course we want optimal. In the beautiful ideal world of training resistance and everything from strength and movement and performance, we want optimal. But that's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. Time efficient stuff that we've got to get in, what's available, the kit and equipment that's around you. So even from a specificity aspect, as a coach, I find that it's really important for me to go, okay, well, I'm going to give you a squat derivative that I'd really like you to achieve today, because we know that we want to try and drive a conjugate stimulus. We want to try and hit a squat derivative pattern. The movement that you decide is entirely up to you. I'd like you to try and bias this because we're looking at quad development at the minute. And for us, we really, really want to focus on trying to, we might do a cyclist heel elevated barbell squat. I want you to try and bias that because we know there's a bit more of a quad dominant pattern there. Well, if you go into the gym, there's no racks available. Well, what does the fucking guy or girl do now? And it's having exercises in your wheelhouse that as a good coach will do with you. They'll say to you things like, okay, well, if there's no back squat, let's go for a secondary movement, maybe a leg press. If there's no leg press, maybe we can do a hack squat. If there's no hack squat, okay, well, let's just load a heavy goblet. And maybe there is a way and a means in which we can apply these things to help people understand more specifically how they can get that demand in their body. And you just won't get this if you haven't worked with a coach. It's why, of course, we're biased to coaches because we're both coaches ourselves. But I wish that this is a whole other conversation, but I wish that the coaching world was so much more accredited, or there were higher barriers to entry, perhaps, because I think the lower barriers in entry with training and coaching and personal training particularly, people can prescribe all of this without actually understanding what it is they're doing. People can just go online and download some shit carbon copy of something and apply it to somebody else. When you dive deeper and deeper, like the more I am in this industry, the more I'm realizing I know fucking nothing. And that's scary for somebody who's been in this industry for nearly 15 years. Like, that is frighteningly scary. Like, I've done everything that you can think of in the field of tactical strength and conditioning, and high performance. Like, I've done what I needed to do. I feel like I've ticked many boxes. But as soon as I open up another door, there's another box to unfold. There's another I would love to go and sit in Formula One and understand how, okay, let's go and apply a periodized strength and conditioning module to Formula One. Because what I fucking know about fucking fitness, strength, movement, and everything in between will mean nothing in the grand scheme of things when it comes to Formula One. And the same could be applied to somebody who is a fucking world champion of pogo fucking sticker. Like, this is the thing I'm trying to get at here, is that when we talk about specificity, even with all the knowledge and tools in the world, I wouldn't know what to do with a Formula One player unless I took a real deep dive into understanding them and everything about the sport.
It's the Dunning-Kruger effect, isn't it? The more you
Massively.
know, the more you realize you don't know. But equally, I'd maybe give a more positive spin on that. That I think is a good thing to be at that stage where you realize, and this is where you see coaches being perhaps more conscientious about where their remit lies and becoming more of a T-shaped practitioner. You're a really good example, someone who has done everything in the tactical athlete field, where you could be good at everything. And I would bet money that the skills that you've got from working with tactical athletes could be applied to most people in some way, shape, or form. And you do a good job. But if you want to do a phenomenal job with someone, it's almost thinking like being a T-shaped practitioner. So you're a really good generalist, but you're an excellent practitioner in a couple of different areas. And this is something that I know you've brought up on your channels about things like weightlifting. Do you actually have the qualifications to coach someone at weightlifting? Because it ain't just throwing a bar over your head. There's so much more to it than that. And this is, to take it back to, I guess, a more gem pop example here. When I had a client walk in, this is 7 years ago now, I had a client walk in who'd had a knee replacement. And this is the person I mentioned at the start, terrified of falling over. Well, is me getting her to do bicep curls going to be helpful for her goal? Probably not. What is going to be helpful for her goal? She needs to learn how to get down on the floor and get back up again. And that has to be broken down into specific parts. Where is she at right now? Where can she actually get to in a squat? If she was on the floor, what is she actually afraid of? So there is that psychological element. There's the tactical element, like what's around her. Can we use a couple of things to help her out? But also, the ultimate goal is no help, no aid, get back up off the floor. And the same exact principles are applied to that person as they are to the person who wants to clean and jerk double body weight over their head.
Yeah, 100%.
It's all got to be for the end goal.
Yeah, and I think that's where I think It's weightlifting is a really good example. I think you're probably right. Like from on the grand scheme of things, should I say, when we talk about even as a coach, the application of what you do can be underpinned in lots of different ways. We can use it across a multitude of different sports, different spectrums, different training. And again, like I have no doubt if I went into the Formula One world, interestingly, one of my very, very close friends, Ricky Abel, he looks after, he's a motorsport fanatic, absolute motorsport fanatic. And he's messaged me a while ago and spoke about, can I become the strength and conditioning coach? Can I be his strength and conditioner? He's a race driver. He owns a race car team called Kiana Motorsport, incredible group. And I'm sat there thinking, my God, this is a whole different field. But actually, when you go into we talk about the field of motorsport, there is a lot of principles that can be applied to the field of motorsport that we take from the tactical athlete setting. The same in which about that lady who had that knee problem or had that falling over issue. Well, it doesn't matter that. It does to a degree, but where she's as a coach, what's my job as a coach? And there's an incredible coach online doing something right now with all those kids that are disabled children and disabled adults. And all he's doing is, I saw it the other day. It was absolutely amazing. He tied up, unbelievable. He tied up. He's got such great banter with his clients. He put two of his clients on the floor, both of them wheelchair bound, but they have some use and some motor unit recruitment stuff that they need to work on. They have to get up, they have to get down, etc. He laid them on the floor as if they'd fell out of their chair. On lovely mats, he tied them up and said, right, you've got to escape, you bugger. Let's go. Come on. I'm going to kick you if you don't do it. And he's really like in their face. It's the most joyous and most humbling thing you can see on social media. It's incredible. Mm-hmm. But interestingly, the specificity with that, people would look at that and go, well, what are you training? It just sounds like, it looks like a playground for kids. No, it's not. Because if you think about what challenges and the tactical challenges that these kids that are going to face, that there's disability children and disabled kids and children, adults, them falling out of a wheelchair or falling over is a highly likely thing that could happen. A highly likely thing that could happen. If they're not prepared for that, and they don't know how to get themselves back up using their arms, shimmy themselves round to get themselves back into their chair, then when crunch time comes and things like that happen, and touch wood they never do, they're not going to be prepared to, or even in a position to be able to go through it. And I saw one more, and I think this is a really good one just to sort of highlight. There was a woman that was 103 years old, and there was this sequence of videos that went over, I think it was 103 or something like that. It was a sequence of her getting out of her chair, and her practitioner, her carer, just a carer who was clearly into his fitness. And it showed a video of him going around. He used to go 3 times a week, and it'd be week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. And he used to video it from the side. And on the first one, he'd have to hug her and pick her up. The second one, he'd have to hug her and pick her up. The third one, he'd have to hug her. The fourth one was a little bit less of a hug. It was an arm, and then it was a bit more arm and a bit more arm and a bit more arm. And then it was hands. And then it was hands. And then it was the frame. And then she could stand up, and it was a bit of a push from the back. And then all of a sudden, this 104, 105-year-old woman, after 12 weeks of standing up out of a fucking armchair, can now stand up and be mobile, and the elation and joy in her face at 105 to stand up out of a chair and reclaim some of that tactical stuff back in her life. Like, the environment is now hers. She owns the environment. That's the fucking point of this. That's the whole point, and the whole understanding and the practical implications of why we do something in terms of specificity. Specificity, if you wanted a visual representation, they're the two perfect examples. They've trained to get up and down off of a fucking chair, and they've done amazing at doing it. Now, let's go and apply that to a group of individuals who just want to get fitter and faster and stronger. It's a double-edged sword. There are nuances coming out of the fucking yin-yang. So many considerations. And this is the individual differences that I think people, if we can really get people to understand what specificity is, it's not just about how much weight should you lift in a squat? It's everything that you've gone through there, isn't it? It's the foot position, the bar position. It's what stage are you at in your training? What load should we hit? What rep range should we hit? How accustomed are you? What are the connective tissue elements talking? What are they saying? Are they prepared for this? What about from a peripheral and mate, we could even go down the neurological aspect of preparation. Like, we haven't even discussed that. Like, neurally, what is your body prepared to help you with lift?
Mm-hmm.
And it's all of these things that there has never been a no one size fits all approach. And for me, specificity, you will get away with so much training that's generalist. But for me, if you want to go that extra level, and you don't have to take your health and performance to a whole new level, but if people just did specificity for 1 year and were really, really conscientious of what they were doing,
it's amazing. It's truly amazing what you can see. And this is where I know we've used powerlifting a lot as an example here, but you watch someone do a 1 rep max randomly in the gym, and sometimes, it feels good, and for whatever reason, you can hit a higher number. Great. Watch someone who's been properly peaked for a competition do it, who's had the skill of doing heavy singles for a long, long time.
Yeah.
The best example of this is Tony Cliff in the UK, who is he's been doing it for years. And you talk about mastery of a sport. You watch whatever weight he puts on his back, and it's just a thing of beauty. Every single time, he's just so good at it. But it's because he's practiced the thing that he needs to be good at. And that's for most people, that's going to be a very extreme example of being a specialist, because he does one thing, that sport. But it matters to him. And I think this is the thing that people get too general with their goals. So they miss out on the stuff that really matters to them. And I think one of the best questions you can ask yourself when it comes to the stuff you're trying to pursue in training is, what are you trying to do and why does that matter to you? And if it does not light a fire under your arse, it does not matter enough to you.
Yeah.
And
I absolutely agree with that.
That's the gap that most people need to bridge at the very start. Why does that matter to you? Why is that goal important? Why does this make you excited? And that's where you're going to really be able to tap into the psychological part of this and start really getting that buy-in for yourself of why you see the specificity being worthwhile, and stop using specificity for small periods of time before you change it, because that's not being specific, that's being general. You can't do conjugate for 4 weeks and then back to linear and then do some endurance and then do some plyometrics for a month. Like, you're changing around way too much. And I think it maybe comes from this idea that was rife when I was first in the industry and still is there, I think, a lot less now. But the fact that we have to have this novelty and change all the time to be getting the most out of training, that's not specificity. That's throwing 200 stones at a small target and hoping one of them hits, versus throwing one stone at one target that you know you're going to hit.
Spend the time in, and again, we've not even tapped into micro, meso, and macro cycles here. We've literally just tickled on what we think specificity should be about. And listen, the goal with what the Art of Performance podcast really is centered on making fitness simple and making high performance possible to the masses, because fitness and high performance can go hand in hand, and you don't have to be some absolute mad, crazy person in the world of fitness in order to be a high performer and in order to apply these principles and specificity, because you can be the dad of 3 kids who works in a factory setting, is grafting his arse off, and just loves a little bit of power building or power training or strength training and just wants to get a little bit better at it. Equally, you could be a woman, a mother of 2 or 3 children, and it could just be related to the fact that you want to be burly enough that if your kids kick off and start something, you can pick both of them up in a cradle position and walk out of that shop arm in arm like Arnold Schwarzenegger and carpets underneath, knowing that they ain't going nowhere because you've got them locked in. And I think if we can understand, or if you can take away that specificity can really teach you to excel in whatever you want to make a deliberate action in. And if you want to make a deliberate, calculated change to whatever it is that you want to do, whether it's running with your kid, whether it's throwing a ball down the road, whether it's, I've got little things like I want to beat my kids in a 3-point start and I want to be able to do backflips on a trampoline at 65. I still want to be able to do those things. Yeah, I am quite powerful. I am quite speedy. I'm quite athletic and agile. I want those things because the things I'm doing now in my training, they're deliberate, they're calculated, and they are all centered on me doing that, even if they are small little doses. And we can talk about the minimum viable product. We can talk about minimum effective dose in our next episode, ladies and gentlemen. But I think as a parting sort of final statement here, Jack, what would you say to anybody as a sort of final little hurrah when it comes to specificity?
I would actually leave you with an example, because I think when it comes to specificity, people have this idea in their mind that they need to be this weightlifting monk training in the mountains of Kazakhstan 6 times a week, living a one-dimensional life, because that's what specificity looks like. It's something that's accessible for everyone. It does not mean that this doesn't fit in with the rest of your life here. And to give an example, I'm going to shout out one of my clients here who we both know very well, who is a mum. She is a business owner. She is a wife. She is a friend. She's also a very accomplished powerlifter. And she's now decided to go into a different sport along similar lines, but into weightlifting. So it doesn't mean that life gets put on hold because you want to get really, really good at something. But what I would encourage people to do is just stop chasing everything for a while and think about what matters most to you in terms of your physical pursuits, and really double down on it and see what you're capable of, and remind yourself that it does not have to be that forever. You can change what you're doing at any time you like, but give it a year. Give it a year at least of getting really, really good at something, and just see what you're capable of.
That's it. Love that. What a way to end episode 44, ladies and gentlemen. Jack, thank you so much for joining us. And we will absolutely, I hope, be welcoming you back for episode 45, 46, 47, 48, and maybe a few others. And
I would love to.
Love that. We'll be diving deep into more training philosophies, more training principles, ladies and gentlemen. So you don't have to listen to my monotone voice. You can have the fine Yorkshire man himself. And who knows, you might even have an appearance from both of our dogs at one point. So if that's not to hang around on the YouTube channel, or at least keep your ears plugged into the Art of Performance podcast, I'm sure the dogs will make an appearance at some point barking. But I just want to take this opportunity to all of our listeners. If you haven't done so already, please, please, please like, follow, share the podcast. It massively helps us reach more people out in the world of health and fitness, to try and educate more people, make fitness and high performance accessible to the masses, and truly help us build a more resilient fucking group of human beings that are out there. Jack, where can people find a little bit more about you, mate, if they're interested in understanding your methodologies and your principles of training?
So easiest place to find me is on Instagram. That is where I am most active, at JC_performance coaching. And my DMs are always open for questions. I love to hear what people think about this sort of thing, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a post, whether you're just curious about what sandwich I ate that day or how long I took my dog for a walk on. Whatever it is, I'm always open to questions, to conversations, to sharing knowledge.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Jack, my good sir, thank you very much indeed. To all the listeners, we'll see you next week. Have a great one.